Wesley Lynch, so good to have you at Heavy Chef. We know each other from the agency world, so now it's great to see you in this entrepreneur guise, and you've been doing this now for the last 7 years, right?
7 years, that's it, yeah.
Yeah, so I think just as a starting point, and I want to just unpack a bit of a bugbear of mine, in that in South Africa, we are so bad at recognizing the great stories that we have in our entrepreneur sector. And I mean, yours is definitely one of them. Snapplify has kind of gone from nowhere 7 years ago, basically a figment of your creative brain. And now it's one of the hottest startups in the sector. And I think you're doing such great things. And I really want to get to shine a light on your story. So I think my opening question to you is for the many people out there who don't know you and don't know Snapplify. Can you elaborate? What is Snapplify and why should we care?
So I think what Snapplify is today is very different to, I think, what we thought it would be when we started. As it stands today, really focused on the education sector. Primarily what we're known for is delivering digital textbooks. But really, as a platform, we're looking to offer all the technology, whether it's tools or services, to really, I suppose, improve quality of education.
Yeah.
Look at how do we increase the ability to scale education offerings, and in some cases also reduce ultimately the cost of delivering a quality education. But that's quite far from where we started. And, in the beginning, we really had technology. The technology was mostly around the distribution of content, and we kind of had a solution, and we were looking for a problem to go and solve with it. So we did everything from magazines, newspapers, sheet music, but education is where we found the niche and the real value proposition, and we've doubled down on that, and that's where we find ourselves today. So it's one of those cases. It's 7 years to be an overnight success.
A 7-year overnight success, for sure. But I think those first early years was really casting the net out wide, right? And then kind of bringing it back and seeing where the sweet spots lay. I mean, essentially, Snapplify, as I understand it, is it's a distribution mechanism for digital content, right? Absolutely. So with that in mind, you've found this niche in education, and you've created essentially a platform that educators and people who want to be educated can come to and distribute and consume these learning materials. Can you define, from a business point of view, what is a platform, and why is it important to create a platform for a business such as Snapplify?
So I think putting your finger on exactly what a platform is, both I think covering what the technical definition is, perhaps what the business model definition is quite challenging. But we can see how our business has evolved from, I think, being what maybe was a service or a tool in the beginning to ultimately become a platform. And I think we're in that final stage where we can truly call ourselves a platform because we're beginning to open up some of our services and internal technology out to third parties now, that even it makes sense for competitors to potentially use some of our technology. And the first point where we saw this change from perhaps us offering a very narrow set of tools to becoming a platform is when we saw, in order to fulfill what ultimately was our value proposition, there were problems adjacent to what we were trying to solve, and we needed to go wider and wider and wider, and that comes with challenges, and I think sometimes maybe isn't the right thing to do, but it really worked for us. So when we need to distribute books, one of the things we've got to do is to know which learners need which books. Sure. So we start having to do identity management for students, and we get really good at that, and then perhaps someone else should be looking at using our identity management platform. And now we've got a bunch of vertical services that we expose to a number of different stakeholders in the industry. Some of our customers, some are partners, and ultimately we become the glue in that ecosystem. And that's, I suppose, probably what everyone is looking for when they start moving towards a platform business model.
So in a way, it's a solution, right? It's a way of solving the hurdles that you would have in logistically delivering those learning materials that I think in the past you had this very cumbersome thing. We had a product which needed to go from point A to point B, and it was quite cumbersome to get that product to a different place into the hands of all the learners. And I guess in a way, you've smoothed that process out using technology. I mean, would that be accurate?
Absolutely. I mean, in all the processes, I suppose, from identifying, profiling learners, what is the content that they need, delivering it, then looking at the payment infrastructure for it, and then something that I suppose is relatively new in the space, how do you then collect analytics, interpret that to understand what can we learn from the effectiveness of the content, or even can we optimize procurement in some way? All of those areas are relatively new and have different sets of challenges down to hardware accessibility, bandwidth. So we've looked at each of those areas to understand how can we introduce technology to solve some of those problems. And by introducing the efficiencies across that value chain, then I think there's some real broad efficiencies that can then be derived.
But you don't own any books?
No books.
And you have no learning materials that you create?
Nothing whatsoever. So,
okay. So you're essentially the bridge between the two parties, right? So you're bridging that divide.
Absolutely. I mean, when we work with publishers, particularly some publishers where perhaps their first experience of an ebook is the discussion they're having with us, we like to explain to them that we are the digital equivalent of their printers, the delivery trucks, and the storefront. So, that's probably the easiest place to start. And then digital does give us, I think, some extra value we can bring. So, obviously, you don't have the same market intelligence in print with consumer analytics and things like that. So we can go a little bit deeper and maybe close the loop back to them so they can have a better understanding of their clients and improve their content. But that, is a useful analogy when explaining where our business fits in the print world.
And where is Snapplify now? I mean, I know you from back when we both ran digital marketing agencies and so on, and obviously now you've been really stuck in the trenches with this. I mean, it's now obviously burst to the fore with some recent big media announcements of investments and expansion and really good news, obviously. But can you give us a bit of an insight, lifting the hood a little bit?
I mean, I think the media and all the press, everyone's been very gracious. We're keeping our heads down and I think mostly doing more of what we've been doing at least for the last 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
And the focus really is expanding into Africa. A big change for us was the launching of our freemium offer. So that allows schools to register and use the platform for free. And obviously with some watered down features, but a very compelling offering. And that sees, we have anywhere between 10 or 15 schools a day register.
That's amazing.
And
that's primarily in Africa, right?
Primarily in Africa.
Okay.
I mean, there are schools really all over, but predominantly English speaking is the focus. And where we're seeing then is which of these markets now are looking for what we've got to offer. So the big push for us, and I suppose the reason for the capital, is really to be able to go and say, how do we double down on East Africa, where we've been doing some work for the last couple of years. West Africa, just came back from Frankfurt Book Fair now. We're negotiating French rights, because obviously we want to go after French-speaking Africa.
Sure.
And so it's really to push hard now into the rest of Africa. As far as where we are, we're operating in 14 African countries to some degree.
That's amazing, yeah.
And we just want to grow that, and we know it's going to take some good people and localization. So we need to get boots on the ground in a couple of those. So that's the next steps for us.
And then lastly, from my side, I really want to get to grips with some of the learnings that you have taken on board over the last 7 years. Certainly not an overnight success, but I mean, you must have bumped your head a couple of times, and you must have come up with some real kind of nuggets. Have you got some real kind of salient points that you could share with us in terms of those learnings for the entrepreneurs out there that want to themselves, they have aspirations of creating their own platform with their own moat and their own distribution mechanisms?
So I think, just off the top of my head, two things come to mind. One, when we started out, we were quite broad, and it took us longer than I would have liked, which is easy in hindsight, for us to really pick education and double down on it. And I remember the day when I saw some of these other areas that we kind of thought we viewed them as easy money, but they really were just these sacred cows. And the day we decided was a big turning point, and it was really important not just to focus on what our objective was, but for also to create an identity that everyone internally understood. What was the mission? What were we looking to do? So you mentioned it earlier, us being the de facto Edtech platform for Africa. That's the mission. When you're doing these other things, it's not so much that they distract you. I mean, even if they're making money or whatever, it dilutes the objective, and then it comes with overheads in communicating internally for people to be able to make judgment calls as to whether or not we should partner with these people or not. Then the other one is knowing when the business you're building you'd like it to be a platform, but it's actually just a feature in someone else's. And that's a difficult space to be in, and we're seeing it a lot in the Edtech space. And one of the reasons why we also raised the capital was, I think there's perhaps opportunity for us to acquire some of those or invest in some of those businesses. Plugging those features into the platform we have, I think, can give those businesses, I think, an opportunity to really shine. Whereas if you are sitting and ultimately what you've got is a feature, it's very, very difficult to go and monetize what essentially requires you to build a platform, but your only value proposition is just that one feature. We almost got caught a couple of times like that.
It's almost like an inflated sense of yourself. You really need to be honest and figure out, okay, this is where we're at, and this is the journey, but this is where we want to go.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with it. I think you can make a business being a feature, but then you need to align and understand who is the platform. A perfect example is guys that are building plugins. There are people that have made very solid business.
WordPress, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there's thousands of businesses that are highly profitable that have just plugged into this ecosystem that is WordPress.
But you've got to pick an ecosystem, back it, align with the people that are in it. And then also, if you're playing in a market where, if you take the WordPress example, if you want to sell a WordPress plugin and there isn't an established WordPress community in the markets that you're working in, it's very, very difficult for you to get that off the ground. You've got to go and see where is the ecosystem, where are you aligning with that. And unfortunately, in Edtech, particularly in the African space, there hasn't been, I think, a lot of collaboration and much of an integrated ecosystem, which is ultimately what we're trying to foster and develop going forward.
Wes, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the energy that you've put into this space and for contributing to the tech sector in South Africa. And long may your success and this trajectory continue.
Thanks. You're so generous.
Cool, man.
Cheers, thanks, man.